Vacation from heaven and bring all my historical accounts of the Women's Improvement Club of Corona and visit with all my other Federation sisters from heaven who do the same. I've got the history. Ladies? Oh, I know who you are. You're the Platt sisters who helped found the club. How do you do?
Hello.
Please sit down. I'm Janet Williams Gould, and I was known not only as a historian for the club, but for the city of Corona. My friends called me the Duchess because I like to wear lavish costumes and throw some wonderful parties. But my first concern was preserving what you and the other ladies did as pioneers in our fair city of South Riverside, as Corona was first known. I came to Corona in 1910 with my then husband, Walter Dean, and my two children, Manly and Elise. I was born in 1878 on a plantation near Fayette, Missouri, the daughter of the state treasurer. My life was a gay life of a socialite, but I managed to graduate from a Midwestern college after majoring in English and history. Walter passed away in 1918, and in 1923, I married a widower, Mr. Chester Gould, and acquired a lovely stepdaughter, Suzanne Gould. I'm proud to say I was listed in Who's Who in California, was a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and was president of the county organization of the Republican Women's Club. My family's White House on South Main Street was set down in the midst of a lemon grove and beautiful gardens. We grew citrus on our acreage, and my husband served on many agricultural boards. We changed the staging, the blocking.
Helen Platt. I'm Helen. I too was an organist, and a good one, if I say so myself. I had some of the best trees in the citrus belt. I'm Helen Platt. Before I came to Corona in 1893, I went to St. Louis Normal School in St. Louis, Missouri. A normal school is a school for students wishing to be primary teachers and is associated with a religion. At that time, there were separate schools for future teachers of children of color and for future teachers of white children. At any rate, I am certainly glad the world has progressed in that area. After graduation, I taught primary school in St. Louis and later taught at Grant Seminary in Chicago along with my sisters here, Anna and Stella.
After I got here, my love for Corona early history blossomed, and soon I was involved in research from the time of the Guisano Indians. As chairman of the History and Landmarks section of the Women's Improvement Club, I was instrumental in obtaining state landmark status for numerous sites in and near Corona. I gave a cheer in heaven a bit back when I looked down and saw that one of the original bronze plaques commemorating the arrival of the Butterfield stage at Temescal Canyon that I was responsible for was rededicated. I also was responsible for plaques at the Serrano Tanning Baths and a market where U.S. Army General John C. Fremont surveyed for Washington in 1849. The plaques were quite expensive, over $25 in 1927. I understand that the one at Dos Lagos cost about $1,000. My, how things have changed. Throughout my life, I have tried to make history interesting to other people, particularly to students. My pageant, The Golden Circle, was written for Corona's Jubilee in 1936. 400 of Corona's school children acted in the play as Indians, Spanish dons, gold seekers, and even citrus tree pests. My 10-episode play was held on the high school football field. I love to dress in costume, as I said, and I would put on Spanish clothing and lecture and recite poetry to many different organizations. I died in 1964. The same year, I received an award from De Anza District for my research on Corona history. I feel a particular kinship with modern-day Mary Brenner Wynn, who has written more than one book on the history of Corona and is a vital member of Corona Historical Preservation Society.
Janet, I'm so glad to meet you. I'm Stella Platt. My sisters, Anna and Helen, and I worked very hard for the club. Did you know that I was instrumental in changing the name of our town from South Riverside to Corona? I think Corona is so much more poetic, and it means crown or circle, which describes Grand Avenue. We were very happy about that. Did you know also that the Women's Improvement Club began as the Town Improvement Club? I was the youngest of 8 girls and was born in 1846. Our parents, the Reverend Adam Wakeman Platt and Sarah McAllister Platt, died by the time I was just a young teenager. You are a historian, Janet, and it might be a bit upset that some of the local history books say our father was a minister in Corona. He had been a Presbyterian minister in 1841 in New York, but not in Corona. As a matter of fact, he was long gone. I was 47 when we came to Corona.
I was 52 years old.
I was 54 years old, I know. We were older and had learned much then from experience, but we recruited a number of young and energetic women also. My sisters and I never married, but lived together at 156 Grand Avenue, which later became 1192 East Grand Boulevard. The house was originally built for George L. Joy, a founder of Corona, but he built a larger one before it was finished. Sadly, our magnificent home no longer stands, but it once stood on the corner of Garretson and East Grand. We always had a house full of guests. We entertained our relatives from back east, and they often stayed all winter. One of our relatives, Miss Merlin Rhodes, loved Corona so much, she later settled here and is buried with us at Sunny Slope Cemetery. She lived to be 97 years old. Our niece, Miss Lillian Lewis, came to Corona and lived with us till the age of 92.
I was very active in the Congregational Church of Corona. My sisters, my niece, and I felt we had much of God's work to accomplish. I served as a trustee with the church. The pastor trusted me to be his delegate for the meetings of the District Congregational Association and the Home Ministry Society. I loved visiting and learning from the other congregational churches. I noticed that Kathy Shepherdson, a modern-day member, is presently on the board of the same congregational church. I was also on the school board, like present member Sharon Martinez, and I was learning the art of citrus farming. However, I saw the need for the women of Corona to unite, and in 1898, I sent a letter to certain ladies of Corona proposing a meeting to form a Town Improvement Association of Corona. 21 civic-minded women joined the association. For the first 15 years, we held meetings in the members' homes, but 3 years later, I died in 1913. The clubhouse was completed. The building site was donated by Mrs. E.L.S. Joy and her daughter, Mrs. W.H. Jameson. Isn't it wonderful that it is on the National Register of Historic Buildings? You know it was patterned after a Welsh church. From the outside, it just looks like a big old house. Of the many important positions I held in Women's Improvement Club, the one I am most proud of is being in charge of planting the pepper trees on Main Street. You have no idea how that spruced up that dry, desolate area.
That's not all we did. We encouraged the city council to establish a permanent library, a library board, and set up the first humane society. We spent many afternoons telling stories to public school children, and I declared my support for women's suffrage. It does my heart good to see volunteers of the club in 2008 going to the Circle of Hope homeless shelter to read to the children. That young whippersnapper Anna Dewey is part of a fine tradition. One of our very first projects was to get the city council to clean streets and alleys. A delegation went before this august body, but the request was shunted off with the explanation that there was no money for such foolishness. The councilmen were then asked to do the cleaning themselves, and that ruffled their official dignity. So the ladies brought out their brooms and dustpans and proceeded to do the work themselves. Many of the wives of the councilmen were on that workforce, so they suddenly discovered they were mistaken, and there was money for cleanup after all. This was the beginning of the first sanitation department in Corona. In the winter of 1910, my sister Helen's heart failed. She was 69 years old. My sister and I donated a large, round, stained glass window to the Congregational Church in her memory, and it is still there today.
Well, I was deaconess of the church and was actively interested in the missionary society and in the Sunday school. But I was also the maverick of the family. I earned my degree at Cooper Institute before I came to Corona, and I worked as an artist in oil and watercolors. I know present-day members, Lorraine Pedosa, Becky Floyd, and Jan Warner are also artists. My specialty became wood engraving. It was very unusual for a woman to work in wood at the time, but I never worried about being different. After college, I opened a studio in Chicago and belonged to the Bohemian Club, a society of artists. I was a member of David Sweeney's liberal church. His doctrines were regarded by many as heresy, and he was charged with 28 counts before the Chicago Presbytery. However, the trial lasted for several weeks, but he was acquitted in the end. Corona was quite tame for me intellectually, but my spirit of youth, daringness, adventure, and friendliness served me well. I actually served as president of the Women's Improvement Club in 1908 and 1909.
Weren't you on the park board for several years?
Why, yes, as a matter of fact, I was appointed park commissioner. We purchased the present city park over on 6th Street for $9,000 in April of 1912. That was a lot of money. I died in 1916 at the age of 70. I thought the words used in my obituary were especially touching. You may break, you may shatter the vase if you will, but the scent of the roses will cling to it still.
Oh, wow, that's cool. Yeah.
I like the words we wrote in our club magazine on February 23rd, 1909. They were, our creed, we believe that work is a privilege, kindness a duty, and worry a crime. I also like the Federation motto, the world is advancing, advance with it. In 1913, our motto was, what is civilization? The power of good women. I'm so proud that youngster Anna Dewey too. in the Press Enterprise past February, Anna wrote, "There is a common misconception that young people can't make a difference and have no say in what is going on. Not true. There is so much we can do for our communities, environment, and our world. Did you know that Julia Lathrop from the Chicago General Federation of Women's Clubs supported the first juvenile court laws that became a model for courts all over the U.S.? Also, the American Library Association credits women's clubs with establishing 75% of the county's public libraries."
What amazing women. Well, look who's here. A fellow historian from the Women's Improvement Club. Ladies, here is Harriet Yates, president of the club from 1972 to 1974, and club historian during her years as a member. Harriet provided a lengthy article in the Corona, California Commentaries book, which was published in 1986. I'll let her tell you more about the activities of the club founders.
Thank you, Janet. I brought a few pioneers with me. This is Mrs. Jameson and Mrs. Joy. Mrs. Joy, your picture is in the entryway of the clubhouse. We wouldn't be standing on this stage if it weren't for you two. You two donated the site on which the building stands. I know it took $2,500 at 7% interest to get this built in 1913. The cornerstone was laid May 31st, and the grand opening reception was held on October 19th, 5 months later.
Did you know the members donated another $2,500 and bought that oak table out in the sunroof that is still used for teas? It paid for kitchen appliances, those carved oak panels over the fireplace, and this lovely piano. You know, we Jameson women have been movers and shakers in women's improvement all through its history. I came from the Midwest and was familiar with the social justice work of Jane Addams, who established the Whole House to lift up the poor. As president of the club in 1912, I was instrumental in founding the Associated Charities Committee. This led to the founding of the Home League and Settlement House in 1918. It was meant to lift people up from poverty and to share with the less fortunate the bounty of society's advantages. Everybody just calls it the Settlement House now. And Women's Improvement members still support its activities with the Empty Bowl fundraiser, wrapping Christmas presents for the poor at Christmas, and offering financial support, and also by participating in the shopping spree for clothing and supplies for students at the beginning of each school year. Presently, member Ann Glickman is a member of the Settlement House Board and carries on another fine tradition of the late Mary Sanders.
Did you know that in the beginning, the Settlement House was located at the corner of 3rd and Joy Streets? In the beginning, services offered at Settlement House included Bible study, sewing, housekeeping methods, and English. Later services included free baths, free dental care, shoes for children, food, clothing, and help with gas and electric bills. Late member Anita Benedict, who was a part of the club for over 50 years, recalled how during the Depression, she was a Red Cross volunteer at the clubhouse, who would issue $3 to feed a family of 4 for 4 or 5 days. Settlement House continues to help with many services. By the way, you may call me Ella. My maiden name was Ella Louise Skinner.
It is just amazing what you women did in the next 25 years. I know you worked to prohibit minors from buying cigarettes in Corona, provided money for milk and food for lunches for the underprivileged in the public schools, purchased bed linens for Corona Community Hospital, helped dedicate the city plunge, sponsored a class in American citizenship, and established the Well Baby Clinic.
One wonderful part of my life is being married to George Louis Joy. You know, he teamed up with the former Iowan Governor Merrill to form the South Riverside Land and Water Company, which became Corona. Did you notice how many Midwesterners formed our fair city? What attracted me most to Southern California was the healthy weather. I had tuberculosis as a child, and 4 of my daughters died from the typhoid epidemics that claimed lives all along Midwestern rivers each summer. My daughter, Hetty Mary, was the only one who survived. Hetty married William Henry Jameson, and together, Hetty and I donated the land for the Women's Improvement Club. Jameson and George and I were married at age 21 and were part of the Second Great Awakening. We and several of our relatives are founding members of the Corona First Baptist Church. We provided land for other churches too, and tried to teach our grandchildren the importance of humility, generosity, kindness, and appreciation of the talents and interests of others. It is easy to get a swelled head when you know you are descended from 7 who sailed on the Mayflower in 1620, and a long list of European royalty, including Charlemagne, Eleanor of Aquitaine, and King Edward I. My grandson, Joy, once said about me, she could do anything. She sewed beautifully and was known for repairing her rental houses as well as her electric car. When I had lost most of my sight, Joy would read to me from my favorite poetry, from Shakespeare and the Bible. I like to recite long passages from memory and urge the founding of the first public schools in Corona. My daughter, Hetty, served on the school board, and she and her husband were trustees of the University of Redlands. Did you know they helped establish the college, which was founded as a Baptist college? I died in 1910 and never got a chance to see the clubhouse. Hetty saw it though. She died of cancer in 1927. We founding mothers have looked down with great pride on all the activities during wartime too. Pardon me for not introducing Flora Miller here. She'll tell you what she did for the club and for the country.
My name is spelled Mueller, but it is pronounced Miller. I happen to be a Democrat surrounded by Republicans, and that made me a distinct minority in Corona. My Republican friends like to say I would vote for a two-headed dog if we were a Democrat running for election. I wonder who I would vote for in 2023. I know Women's Improvement Club had a progressive league to provide a forum for political discussions with women's suffrage, one of the most important issues. I joined Women's Improvement Club in 1909, and as soon as I arrived at the age of 24. My house, just around the corner, is still standing at 1256 East Grand Boulevard, and has always been stylishly red. I loved fast cars, theater, and roses, and my husband and I owned one of the first cars in Corona, a blood red 2-cylinder Rio passenger car. In 1917, I formed Corona's first branch of the Red Cross to support troops in World War I. I served as its leader for 66 years. I was president of Women's Improvement Club from 1915 to 1917. For 50 years as a member, I helped to revive the Girl Scouts in Corona when they had almost died out. I established Corona's first beautification committee volunteer effort. We had flower shows, garden tours, lectures, everything to stimulate beautification. I lived to be 93 years old and passed away in 1978.
That was World War I. In 1941, the clubhouse was headquarters for officers of the 106th Infantry Regiment stationed around Corona. Club members might remember that what this was like. The women worked towards rationing of sugar, cars, and tires, and were credited with the purchase of $25,000 in war bonds. The clubhouse was used for the classes, for nurses, and for first aid courses, dances, and benefits for the servicemen. Gifts and birthday cakes were presented to the patients at the Naval Hospital in Norco. First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt, a member of the Chautauqua Women's Club, also visited patients at the Naval Hospital in Norco in April 1943. Well, look who's here. It's another of the Jameson women, Eloise. Welcome.
Thank you, Harriet. Since my mother and my grandmother are here, I thought I'd join you. My picture is also on the entryway. My mother is Hetty Jameson, and my grandmother is Ella Louise Joy. We were a happy family, and I had 5 siblings. We had a Chinese cook and a gardener, and mother and father hired the architect who designed the Mission Inn to enlarge and remodel our home at the corner of Joy and Grand. My father owned the citrus packing business that was to become famous and very profitable. When my dad got cancer in 1909, he had my brother Joy arrange a trip around the world for all 8 of us. It cost $20,000. We had a wonderful time. There is a book written about our travels called All 8 Went. We Jameson women are quite independent. I became a biochemist by the time when women were not much part of the scientific world. After I earned my PhD in biochemistry, I lived in Palo Alto, where my adopted son, Frank, still lives. I worked at the Stanford University. In Corona, when I was on vacation in the 1920s, I lived in the now historical Lemuria Grove on Garrison. My sister, Adelaide, lived there during World War II. I am the one who developed pectin and other lemon byproducts. A project much important to me and the process of electrophoresis. Knowing that both my mother and father died of cancer, I felt my research that cancer was caused by a viral infection. When I retired, I continued my work at the University of Southern California until my death in the 70s. Pat Barnes, who's late Pat Barnes at this time, was my assistant. She would draw blood from the white rats I used to experiment with.
The Jamesons have contributed so much to Corona and to the Women's Improvement Club. Another group that did so much for the Women's Improvement Club was Triple M Section, formed in 1947.
Yeah.
The 3M stood for Modern Maids and Matrons. The meetings were held in the evenings to allow working women and those with small children to become members. For 36 years, Triple M sponsored the fashion show and raised thousands of dollars for various projects. One of these was to purchase land for the YMCA. The modern director of the YMCA was our own member, Yolanda Carrillo. Past members of the Triple M were Alicia Black and Andrea Puga. Speaking of Andrea, who is the past was the last mayor of Corona and 2-term president, did you know that every woman mayor of the city of Corona from Raina Parker in 1966 has been a member of the Women's Improvement Club? That includes the late Flora Spiegel and her daughter-in-law, present member Karen Spiegel, who is what a rich herstory is being written. Here's Janet Gould again. Did you want to say anything, Janet?
Time to head back to heaven, ladies. We have truly enjoyed seeing how beautiful the clubhouse still looks. And sometimes, if you sit in the parlor or walk through the auditorium, you might just hear our gentle sighs as we reminisce about our wonderful past. Or is it just